Okay, we're back. It's time to get bloody. So let's slap down a flip fluid object, aka just a plain old flip object. And the idea is this is going to be our blood. I'm not even going to give it a name. It's going to be a blood source. The first thing I'm going to know is that obviously we're going to hook things up to our particle, to our params, just like we do because we're good at that. And then we're going to start messing with actual numbers here. Flip fluid object. What do we want it to grab from? By the way, if you get a chance to complain to Houdini, it's another place where we want first input and second input and blah, blah, blah. But we're not. So we're going to say particle field, and it's going to come from our blood source. Blood source. What's it going to come from? Out, because it makes it easy. And I think that's great. We're actually going to initialize velocity and make it go towards the head a little bit. So, and again, this is something I worked out just from screwing around with this before the tutorial. We're going to do that. Leave the boundaries open for now. Let's talk about the physicality of this. So anything special we want to do? I'm going to say yes, because I don't think blood should bounce off. It'll actually naturally bounce off just because of the movement of the guy and so forth. But let's turn that off for now. Viscosity and density by default has water, which in reality, let's face it, blood's a little thicker. But let's leave that alone for now. Collisions, those are fine. So that gives us our kind of source. The next thing I'm going to put down is our flip, our actual solver. And flip solver, there's a couple things we're just going to make sure is convenient and happy. One is the substeps. Now, I'm actually going to leave substeps at 1 for this tutorial, but it probably looks a little cleaner and nicer in the final thing if you're moving it to change the substeps. So that's why I'm going to actually have the substeps, max substeps be there, and I'm also going to put them same as out here. I know. Why did I do that? Because I'm not actually changing it. It's because it's good procedure to have. Okay. Now let's talk about particle motion. Anything. This is where it's kind of good once in a while to actually go through these things bit by bit just so you know what the shelf tools are doing. One thing I'm going to say is add ID attribute. I'm not sure if that's actually necessary in our case, but usually at some point I do something with that. So I usually turn that on. Next thing is reseeding. Whoops, where'd my guy go? Reseed particles. Basically what this means is with a fluid, when it stretches apart, it adds more particles in between that. You sometimes get better or faster things by turning this off, and sometimes actually better things, depending on what kind of fluid it is. In this case, I don't mind that, although it will look like the amount of volume increases. I really don't mind that because it's blood and gore, and that's kind of cool. Particle separation and droplets we're going to leave off. I'm going to leave these guys at defaults. But there's always something we've got to do in volume motion. And the first thing we've got to do is the volume limits. Volume limits are a box around it. Here, again, is where, if you ever have a chance to complain to Houdini, this should be like, I want to hook this up to a box somewhere. A lot of times I actually put these guys also as parameters. This time I'm not, just because we're not going to change them during the course of it. And I'm just going to give you numbers that actually work, which is what I'm typing in now. But a lot of times we connect that to a reference. I hate Houdini's like big reference things. I think it should just have a thing here, connection thing here. In any case, dynamics, it doesn't really matter. With collisions, this you're going to want to do. You're like, oh, stick on collision, that would work, because then the blood sticks to them and stuff. But I'm going to say no in this time. Why? Because the goal here is we want this stuff to just be the fluid. The stuff that sticks on the skin, that's what we're simulating with the shader. So although you probably want to hit this stick on collision button, I'm going to say don't do that. And you probably also want to hit viscosity to make it thicker in blood. I'm going to say don't do that as well. I know, I'm no fun. Everything else is pretty much the same. So now let's bring in our BD guy. In other words, our character that stuff's going to bounce off of. Now, here's the thing that's a little confusing. Our guy is not static. He's moving around. That's the whole point of this particular part of this thing, is that he's moving. So why am I throwing down a static object? And the answer is we're going to have a static object but uses deforming geometry. I know, static but changes. and Houdini's naming convention is not great. But it's static in the sense that it doesn't have, it isn't going to be simulated as a rigid body. It'll be used as a collider for this, but this fluid isn't going to affect it. It's not like the fluid's going to knock the zombie's head back or something. This we do a lot of in practice where, I'll probably use this too. We do this a lot of in practice when somebody gives us animation, and they, even if it is fluid, like a fire hose hitting this guy's face, the animators have probably animated as if a fire hose is hitting the guy's face, and we're adding the fire hose, but we aren't actually going to, you know, do an RBD sim on how the fire hose would move the guy around. Sounds a little like old school filmmaking, where you film the person reacting to something and moving the head around, and then you add the thing later on. And back in the old days, that actually looked terrible. Nowadays, in computer-generated stuff, animators tend to be pretty good, actually, about reacting to stuff. And the other thing is there's also back and forth. In the old days, if you film them and they don't move right when we add the thing, we just leave it and it looks weird. Nowadays, if we give a good fire hose and they go, oh, the animator's animation isn't reacting to the fire hose enough, he didn't know it would be that strong when he made it, they'll actually send it back to animation and have the person reanimate it to our, you know, to our effects, which is nice. Also, as I was talking, we're just using the zombie head, remember, not the whole body. Why do I care? I care because of the speed of the simulation. And specifically, when I go to physics here, again, I'm going to turn off bounce and leave everything else the same. But here in collisions, normally when I do that, have this on and look at the volumes and blah, 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 blah. I'm turning that off. We did this before with our grid, and we're definitely going to do it with this because our head and our geometry isn't necessarily closed so it can make a good volume out of it. And we could always make it so it does make good volume out of it, but we don't really need to. It's actually fast enough to do this, and it's got the advantage of being pretty nifty and accurate. Okay, so what do we do now? Merge, and bum, 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 bum. And I'm going to connect that to the output. Okay, and I hate to tease you, but we're coming up on time, so I'm actually going to go to the next lesson on this. Basically, I'm going to hit the play button, and if anything goes wrong, we'll have to fix it. And, oh, you know, I can't even do that to you guys. You guys are too cool. Okay, I'm actually at the play button. If anything goes wrong, I may fix it in between. It goes, and cool. It actually works. Let's take a closer look. And let's turn off, if I go over time here, forgive me a little bit. We're going to turn off that, and I'll turn off everything except for the sim. Let's see what happens. It's blue, by the way, right now, just because of by default, the guides use particles that are blue and use colors for the speed, so don't worry about that. Kind of a strong hit, wouldn't you say? Like, I like that he moves and goes and hits into it, but he's still a little bit strong, and also there's something else missing. And that is, are these zombies in outer space? What's going on? We forgot gravity. Or I should say, you forgot gravity, because I would never forget it. You guys just didn't say anything. Gravity in this case, we're going to leave it at the default, negative 9.80 blah, 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 gigawatts per cojoule. I'm kidding. I took physics. I know what it means. Let's see how that changes stuff. That's interesting. I think I'm going to move. You know what? I'm going to actually do this. Our initial source, let's take this guy. Let's move him a little that way. In other words, a little bit in X. Okay, not that little, more than that. Just over here a little bit. Right, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to get a little more coverage. I'm definitely running out of time. Okay, there we go. A nice crisp splooshy. Great, wonderful. I'm actually going to stop the lesson there and go to this next lesson. And in between the two, I'm going to bake this out. And I'm going to bake out the movement of that. Oh, man, you know what I want to do? I want to make the goo thing for you guys. So I'm going to bake that out, too. Now, I'll do that later. I want you guys to see that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bake that out, come back for lesson 15, and we'll put it all together.